and now Walter Mosley. By my count, he's appeared at Politics and Prose at least 6 times, but this is my first time getting to host one of his events, and I'm looking forward to hearing him read from his new novel, And I Sometimes Wonder About You, another Leonid McGill mystery, a character who the New York Times recently called one of the most humane and likable PIs in the business. This is Mosley's 49th book, we think. It might be his 50th. In addition to the mysteries, the incredibly versatile Mosley has written works for young adults, as well as science fiction, nonfiction, historical fiction, and plays. He's won numerous awards, including an O. Henry and a Grammy, as well as a PEN America Lifetime Achievement Award. We're honored to have him here with us tonight. Please help me welcome Walter Mosley.
Can you hear me? That's nice. You know, when I went to college in Vermont too long ago, a guy and all these people did a rendition of Gorey's Curious Sofa. And it was funny. It was just like this. He was sat in a chair, and he was on the corner of the stage, and he kept on saying it. You know, it's like it's a kind of a strange, erotic short story, The Curious Sofa. And I have to say, you know, because, you know, when people introduce you, they want to be nice to you, so they don't talk about your erotica. But I do write erotica, you know, and I really like it, you know. I just paid a guy to write a script for Killing Johnny Fry. You know, and it's going to be R-rated, the film. And, you know, because, and my production partner said, well, we just send them the book. And I don't know if any of you have read the book, but if you read the book, that, you know, they wouldn't, you know, producers are not very creative. And so, you know, when they see something happen, they think it's going to happen on the screen. And so, so I had this guy write a script in which, you know, there were no penetrations or ejaculations or those kinds of things. And so I'm very happy to write erotica, among other things, and I'm also happy to be sitting in this chair thinking about it. You know, it's so hard. You know, it really, you know, it's nice to be in D.C. and it's nice to think about America. You know, we live here, and there's like this other whole world that we have absolutely no idea about. I mean, we can't, because number one, it's too far away, and two, they lie to us all the time. And that's one of the reasons I write about Leonid. You know, I love Leonid because Leonid questions the world in which he lives. I think that's the major thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you a couple of chapters. You know, I always tell everybody I never read too long. I did a reading recently in which somebody paid me $50,000, so I had to read a really long time in order to earn that. But usually I read really short, because the shorter you read, the more people buy your book. You know, the longer you read, the less likely they are to buy your book. They say, well, I heard the book already, why I need to buy it, you know. And so, and you know, I almost always start from the first chapter, so therefore I don't have to explain. You know, those incredibly long explanations people give. Well, you know, John was Mary's husband, but he was really in love with Mary's sister, and you know, and this long story, and you go, and by the time they start reading, you have no idea what they're talking about. So I start at the beginning, and so I'll read, and then we'll talk. You'll ask me questions, and you know, you might ask me about Leonid. You know, I understand that, but if you don't want to, if you want to ask about something else, that's okay. I'm happy. I'm just back. I haven't been home in a month. I was in New Orleans for 5 days. And the least of that trip was that Tulane gave me an honorary doctorate. But like the rest of it was being in New Orleans, which is so great. I love New Orleans. And then I've been in Los Angeles for 3 weeks in a writer's room with John Singleton. It's very funny. And And that I haven't had a job since 1989. You like going to work every day is a bitch, man. You go to work, and actually when you're actually good at what you go to work, because I used to not be good at it, so I wouldn't do anything. But now I'm good at it, so I could think for 8 hours, my brain was so tired. It was awful. God. But anyway, now I'm here in D.C. I'm going to go home tomorrow, which I'm very happy about. And first, I'm going to read to you Leonid. Hopefully, this is my first reading of Leonid, so it may not go actually smoothly, but I think you'll get the idea. Taking the local train from Philly to New York's Penn Station may not be as smooth as the Acela's ride, but it gets the job done for a few dollars less, and sometimes, like that Monday afternoon, the car is nearly empty and a man has time to think. My nearest neighbor across the aisle was slim and dapper gentleman, well past retirement and dressed in an out-of-season white seersucker suit with light blue pinstriping. It was cool that fall, and he would have done well to wear a heavier fabric, but maybe that was just the octogenarian style, or maybe his only suit. He was napping, talking in his sleep. The unintelligible words came from his lips like a sporadic spoken word song in another language. Maybe it was a foreign tongue. 6 rows back, I knew, sat a behemoth of a man, wearing black jean overalls, a heavy, long-sleeved blue and white checkered work shirt. From a thick steel chain around the big man's neck depended a real horseshoe that had never been attached to any hoof. The man was in his 40s, over 400 pounds, with red hair and the raspberry and cream-colored skin of a Norseman. His regular breathing when you got within 2 rows was loud enough to hear over the clacking of metal wheels on metal tracks. At the front of the car, in a seat facing backwards, there sat a small black woman who was somewhere around my age, clutching a red, yellow, and green calico carpet bag by its worn brown leather handle. The 50-something lady looked worried, but that seemed like a regular state of affairs, not any specific problem that plagued her at that point in time. Specific problems have always been my stock in trade. As a young man, I delivered this unwanted commodity. Nowadays, I remove it for a price. A woman came through the semi-automatic door behind the worried grandmother. This potential new resident of our low-occupancy car was harder to define. She was beautiful. Her bright skin was the russet brown I associated with the Caribbean. Her hair was untreated and a little wild, and her eyes a color somewhere between brown and bronze. I noticed her eyes because this was the 3rd time she'd gone past me, considering and then rejecting whatever it was those eyes harbored. Past 30, but nowhere near the next decade, she'd still be lovely when she reached the age of the sleeping man who muttered across the aisle. I wondered what she might have asked if I met her expectations. This thought caused me to look around just in time to see her stop at the behemoth's row. She asked a question and he grumbled something. She asked something else and then he shook his head vehemently, gestured with his left hand, and then turned away, which was no mean feat for a man his size. She nodded at him, almost a bow, and made her way to the end of the car. There she punched the chrome plate that engaged the sliding door. The passing thought that it might have been nice to hear her question firsthand was soon displaced by the certainty that whatever she said would not have improved my life. In my experience, beautiful strangers rarely give as much as they take, and they almost always ask for more. After she was gone, I pulled out my cell phone and entered the characters MAR, then touched a button that had the image of an upright receiver emblazoned upon it. The phone rang once, and she answered. McGill and Son Detective Agency. I'd never asked her to answer the phone like that, but Marty had her own aesthetic, and she had become, in just a few years, an indispensable part of my office. Hey, Marty. Mr. McGill, how are you? She said, in a soft voice that was like a finish on polished steel. Just fine. I get anything from that New York Literary Review ad? No, sir. I checked this noon. I didn't expect an answer. William Williams was in the wind. It was no great loss, like a dollar bet on a $100 million lotto. You were bound to lose, but you had to play. A man named Hiram Sent called for an appointment anytime today, Marty murmured. What's his problem? He didn't say, but it sounded pretty, I don't know, urgent. I'm not coming in today, I said. I'm going straight to the sanatorium from the station. Give him a morning slot, first thing. Yes, sir. Are you finished with the Martinez case? Yeah. Did it turn out okay? He ran once, I said. Who's to say that he won't do it again? Twillin? No, she said, but her tone said more. Where is he? He didn't call in today. I think he's probably at home studying those tapes that you had me give him. There was something off in Marty's voice, something that had to do with my favorite son. I would have asked about it, but just at that moment, I felt a presence at my side. Looking up, I saw the brilliant vision of the beautiful woman who flitted around our car like a hesitant butterfly over a sticky flower. Her dress was a shade deeper than coral, and though it wasn't tight, it expressed her figure just fine. I have to call you back, Em. Something just came up here. On the train? No problem, I said. Just somebody wanting a section of my paper. See you tomorrow, she said, and I broke the connection. Hello, I greeted while putting the phone in the breast pocket of my all-purpose blue suit. I didn't mean to interrupt you, she said. Her voice was somewhere in the lower register of gold. Her black satin purse was cinched at the top like a miniature burlap potato sack. No problem, I was just calling into the office. Oh, she glanced at the door behind her. Can I sit next to you? I was on the aisle, so she was asking for a seat next to the window with a buffer. Is that what you asked Haystack Calhoun back there? She didn't get the cultural reference, but still understood the joke. Smiling and frowning at the same time, she said, I think he's afraid of girls. Good for him. Some men never learned that lesson. Have you? The nameless beauty asked. If I believed in angels, they wouldn't be the sweet, beneficent kind with fluffy wings and halos, but rather haughty, removed Valkyries that tore the soul from your dying breast. That kind of angel would have asked the question she put to me. And I knew I should have answered like the Colossus with the horseshoe necklace. My name's Leonid, I said. Leonid McGill. May I sit on the other side of you, Mr. McGill? She asked. If I wanted her name, I was going to have to work for it. I grabbed my brown rucksack from the empty seat next to me and then stood, making a gesture with my left hand, the same and yet the opposite of the behemoth. She smiled and brushed past me. At that proximity, I got a whiff of something both acrid and sweet, like some ancient forest I had been in. It was a mild scent that caused a strong reaction in a section of my heart that had almost been forgotten. When she was installed there next to me, I knew that the next week or so would be trouble. I smiled and laughed a little. She nodded and then grinned. What kind of work do you do, she asked, turning in her leather seat and lifting her right ankle up under her left thigh. That way, she could look at me while watching both ends of the nearly empty car. There's a guy named Eddie and a woman named Camille, I said. My new neighbor leaned back against the window and smiled. She didn't mind hearing a roundabout answer. Eddie is, or at least he was, what you would call an undocumented laborer from central Mexico, a farmer that could read and write. Camille is an investment banker, more Madison Avenue than Wall Street. What's the difference? My temporary companion asked. What's your name? I replied. That turn got her to grin. She looked both ways down the aisle like a cautious pedestrian and said, Mela Herzog. Interesting name, I mused. Where's it from? I think the origin of Herzog is German, she said. Wait a second. It's German. Her smile was as opaque as her answer. Morella is Italian. Wall Streeters are solitary sharks, Morella, I said, relishing the name. Madison Avenue is populated by social animals, mostly wolves. And what about Eddie and Camille, she asked. At the same time, in very different spheres, Camille and Eddie got tired of their roles in life. She began doing charity work, not giving money, but rolling up her sleeves and going down to the shelters. She also represented dozens of undocumented laborers in courts, gratis. Around then, Eddie was honing his English, becoming a florist assistant and studying his citizenship exam by night. Don't tell me, Morella said. He was arrested by the INS and she got his case. Before I could answer, Morella looked up suddenly, seeing something from the front of the car. I turned my gaze and saw a tall, olive-skinned man with a scar along the right side of his nose like an editor's diacritical marking. He was wearing a long-sleeved black shirt and gray slacks. Slender and likely strong, he reminded me of an unsheathed hunting knife, both haft and blade. I say tall because he was a shade or two over 6 feet, but really, most American men are tall compared to me. I'm half an inch under 5.5 feet tall. What I lack in height, I think I like to make up in muscle. I weigh 183 most mornings, and not too much of that is fat. The taller man's body didn't slow down as he passed our aisle, but his eyes did. Those dark slits took her in, glanced at, and then dismissed me. He didn't look crazy, and so I remained calm. When he passed through the car to the back door, I said, "No." Eddie brought a woman from his Bronx apartment building to Camille's after-hours downtown office on Bowery. The woman, calling herself Mela Herzog, took in a deep breath through her nostrils and looked back at me with what I could only call a bit of pride. "And he spoke such perfect English that she fell in love with him," she said. Something like that. Eddie knew a world that offered her something, and she was the Statue of Liberty as far as he was concerned. They shared intelligence. He passed his citizenship test, and she stopped worrying about where banking could take her. It was like a multicultural fairy tale until about a month ago. "So you're a marriage counselor?" Morella guessed. One morning, Camille woke up in her Park Avenue South condo and found Eddie gone. He'd taken with him 4 pairs of cotton pants, 6 shirts, shoes, and a toothbrush. "You're a PI." She called me after the police told her that it was just a man leaving a woman. I found a trail of calls and a few bills that led me down to Philly. I spent a week in the city of brotherly love buying roses. It took longer than I expected because Eddie had opened his own kiosk in Reading Terminal Market. I talked to him about Mexico in my best Cuban Spanish, and he said that he loved it in America. After 15 minutes of yakking, I told him that I worked for Camille and that she wondered why he ran away. What did he say? I think at that moment she had almost forgotten the olive-skinned hunter that had marked her with his slow eyes. People were always looking at him, I said. White people, other Mexicans, policemen. He started to feel that he didn't belong with Camille or in her world. He felt that he brought nothing to the table, and the table belonged to her. "Wow," she said, pursing her well-formed dark lips. "That's some kind of man, huh?" I told him that my father told me that the first thing a farmer learns is that a man doesn't own the soil, but the earth owns him. The same thing, I said, was true of tables and monies and fancy streets. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "Yeah, maybe too wise." "What did Eddie say?" He hugged me, threw his arms around my neck and pressed his cheek to mine. I think he must have been hoping for a sign to go back home. "To Park Avenue," Morella said, "to Camille." "So did he?" "She came down this morning, paid my fee, and took the man to the Belmont Arms." "That's a wonderful story," Mela Herzog said. She placed a hand on mine. "Why don't you tell me one?" I suggested, turning my palm upward and pressing it against hers. "What would you like to hear?" "Why a stunningly beautiful woman like you would sit next to an old, off-the-rack strap hanger like me?" "You look like a strong man, and I wanted to sit next to you." "Not before you asked Haystack back there," I said. He looked a little stronger, she admitted with a smile. And what use do you have for strong men?" "You saw the guy who walked by." I nodded. "He works for a man that I was engaged to down in D.C. I saw him on the Escalates to New York and got off in Philly. I guess he saw and followed me." "And what does this man want?" I asked. "To take me back." "Why?" I said, thinking about Camille. She was a plain woman with naturally blonde hair and a figure made for 40s films. She asked me to find Eddie, and when I did, she came to him. He broke off the engagement. I'm pretty sure he wants the ring back. Why not give it to him? Because it became my property when he gave it to me, and I accepted. Morella said, with all the commitment of an outer borough storefront lawyer. "But if he's so adamant, why not let him have it anyway? Because I will not be intimidated by thuggery." Something about her choice of words seemed unnatural. "If that was true, you wouldn't be using me as a buffer." She turned and looked out the window. We were entering the outskirts of Newark, New Jersey. After a moment or two, she said, "I sold it. Got quite a bit of money." Then she turned to face me again. "Are you a strong man, Mr. McGill?" "I think so." "Can I trust you?" "In what circumstance do you mean?" "I need protection." I pretended to think about her request, but the answer was a foregone conclusion. After a beat, maybe two, I said, "Sure." "Sure I can trust you, or sure you will help me?" "Both." "And if you don't mind me asking, why should I trust you?" "Because I work for money." Morella's smile seemed to enhance her forest scent. So, notions, ideas, questions, minor criticisms? Yes.
You can hold on a second. I'm just
Thank you for being here. You are my favorite novelist, and I've been sharing that with everybody in the world. It's on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else. So thank you. I appreciate your work, and it talks to me in a very personal kind of way in many respects. But beyond that, the title of this book, who exactly are you wondering about, or who's doing the wondering? What's wondering?
Well, I have a
what's
story.
The wonder going on?
I have a story. You know, my father and my mother used to eat dinner watching television at night. And the news would come on. And you know the news, Walter Cronkite telling you how many Vietnamese were dead and how few Americans got killed killing them. And it would be gone every night. And my father now and again would turn to my mother and he said, "Ella, I think sometimes that everybody in the world is crazy except for you and me. And sometimes I wonder about you." I love that. I just love that. And I always wanted to put it in the title of a book, so now you have it. It does. Leonid and his wife, who have a questionable relationship, his favorite son is not his son, right? It's like that Bob Dylan song. It says, the only thing we knew about Ted Jones is that his real name wasn't Ted Jones, Yeah, it's like that. Anything else? Thoughts, notions? Yes, sir? Wait, you have to wait for the microphone, Otherwise, I won't hear you.
Thank you. That was great. I love listening to you read the spoken word, and I've listened before to some of your recordings. I wonder, when you're writing and composing the text, how many times have you read it aloud before you send off that first draft to someone else?
Quite a few, And this is, I think, like we say, my 49th or 50th book, but the first 15, I read all of them into tape recorders. Any writers out there in the audience, I urge you to do that. When you finish a book, it's really good to read it into a tape recorder because, often, number one, when you read it and read it and read it and read it, you start to not really read the words that are there, but the words you think that are there. And the other thing is how does it sound? What is the dialogue and the dialect and just the prose? How does it sound? So it's good to do. It's good to read out loud. I like that. Yes.
I'm wondering about why, in spite of huge popularity, I'm sure you've heard this question before, but I haven't heard the answer. The Devil in the Boot, the Easy Rollins series, wasn't made into a franchise. Is it just a matter of timing? To me, it seemed like it should have been a natural to have more movies.
There are many answers to that question, but I'm feeling kind of loose tonight. So I'll answer it like this. I wonder why, since the Emancipation Proclamation, has it taken so long for us to find our liberty? It's the same question.
I understand that. I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, what's that?
Unrelated. When you write, do you work on just one piece at a time, or do you write it all the way through? What's that look like?
All right, about writing, which is, the thing I love the most that's not physical. I write every day, every single day. So when I finish a book, and I write on one thing at a time. When I finish a book, I turn it in. That's on Tuesday. Well, on Wednesday, I have to start writing a new book. So I start writing the new book, and maybe I'm 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, and then the people I gave the last book to give it back to me, or a screenplay or a play or whatever, and they give it back to me, and they say, well, here are the notes. And so then I stop what I'm working on, and I start working on that, and then I turn back in, and I start working on what I was working on before, and then I finish that, and I turn that in. So I have 2 things turned in that haven't finished yet, and I start a third one, you know, and then things start coming back. So it seems like I'm juggling. I only work on one thing at a time, but sometimes I have to stop one thing in order to work on another thing.
I'm wondering if you can just share your thoughts about why there appears to be less African American male writers than there are female writers.
Writers?
Yes.
You know,
Fiction writers.
I'm not so sure that it's true today, though right now, today, you have the younger writers. You know, people like Matt Johnson, and, you know, people of, you know, of multiple racial backgrounds like Juno Diaz. There are quite a few young male writers, but the people who have kind of made it, who are, you know, always necessarily older, they came up in a time when feminism, which was started by black people but kind of co-opted by white females, wanted stories of very strong women. And there's a lot of mythology about the strength of black women. I'm not trying to insult black women, but you know, nobody wants to carry the weight that the white world expects black women to carry. So, but there's this notion of it. And so there were quite a few women who were indeed mad at black men, which, you know, kind of makes sense for a whole bunch of reasons, who were writing books and who were very well accepted. So you have, you know, Terry McMillan, Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, and a whole bunch of other people who were kind of pressed to the forefront. And so those writers have very big names and very large presences in the world, and writers who come after them, you know, have those big names. Not people like Octavia Butler so much. And so, but I think that if you looked at the number of writers today writing, broken down racially, just in pure numbers, black writers, male writers and female writers would be equal. But it seems as if there are more female writers because of an older time success. Yes, there's a question up here in the front. Oh, wait, you have to wait for the microphone, otherwise I won't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. In this book, the light starts to shine on Leonid's father. A little more, you get a little more information.
Yeah.
Will the same thing, or in your mind, do you see the same kind of future for his brother?
Oh yeah, definitely. His brother's out of prison. You know, we're gonna see his brother. Yeah, Nikita. Yeah, I'm gonna see him. I can hardly wait to meet Nikita. Yes?
I'm just curious where you live and why you choose to live there.
If you don't know where I live, why are you curious about why I live there?
Because people adopt homes, or they grow up someplace and it influences them, or the change from where they grew up to someplace else sometimes means something?
Well, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I hate driving. And LA is like, it was bad driving when I was a kid. It's terrible now. I was just there, my God. I've always wanted to live in New York, always, always, always. So I was just down in New Orleans. And you know, New Orleans is the only place I've ever been where almost everybody I talk to, I feel like I'm really having a conversation. And so I kind of love New Orleans. I know I can't live there because it would kill me. So I can't live there, but I'm probably going to get an apartment there. I live in Brooklyn, and I love Brooklyn. I love Manhattan, too. It's just 8 years ago when I moved out, they had just raised my rent to $6,500 a month, and I said, really? You know, my parents, you know, could have bought a house when I was a kid for $6,500. I'm going to pay that every month. I asked them, I said, are you going to send somebody up to change my, you know, my bed and do my laundry? you know, because it's more than most hotels cost. And they said no, so I moved to Brooklyn. And I'm so happy I moved to Brooklyn because it's like such a great place, you know. You know, Manhattan is, you know, turning into, you know, like investment bankers and just rich people. And, you know, I don't mind rich people. It's just I don't want to be around only rich people, you know. It's like, you know, you don't want to be around only beautiful people. You know, they make you feel ugly, you know. Yes, another question?
Yes, I have a question. You write so much, so often. Are you compelled to write, or is it something that you just become accustomed to? Do you feel you have to write?
Well, I love writing. And when I don't write, I feel very unhappy. I feel really unhappy, you know, and so I write every day almost, you know, like I spend time working on you know, just like on how you structure things and how you write things and how one can honestly, you know, tell a story. I think that urge of mine is not sexual, racial, or political. I don't think it's any of those things, though that's all I write about. But it's just that idea of, like, you know, getting something together. I remember I was, you know, and writing informs me. It was in the first Leonid McGill, he was attacked by a guy much larger than him. And Leonid's a tough dude, but this dude was just tougher. But Leonid, in the last moment, hits the guy with a chair that falls apart, and the chair flies out and hits the guy so hard, knocks him out. But Leonid is so exhausted from the fight that he also falls unconscious. And he wakes up, and there's three guys standing there. A skinny little guy with ivory-colored skin, a big blousy guy with, you know, like that red and cream-colored skin, like in this book, and then an olive-skinned guy. And he's looking at them, and he says, you know, they all think they're white people, but they don't look anything alike. And that thought stuck with me for years until I realized, wow, white people don't exist. They don't exist. They think that they're white, but if you say, what does white mean? They will have no idea. You know, because, like, you know, does it mean Scandinavia? Does it mean Greece? Does it mean, you know, what the fuck does it mean? Really, honestly, I'm white, you know, or I'm black for that matter. Sit in a room of 100 black people, not 4 of them are the same color, but we're all black people, you know. We call Asian people yellow. I have never seen a yellow person in my life. You know, I certainly have never seen a white person in my life. I mean, you know, like white. You know, I've seen people, you know, tan and freckled and, you know, and so writing actually talks to me. You know, I think that, you know, one of my friends over the years was J. California Cooper. When I first met her, I had not been published yet. I was just, you know, writing short stories and failing at it, and she was reading. And I told her I liked her story. And, you know, I don't know if you knew Jay, but she was something. She said, you like my story? And I said, yes, you know. And then she said, you know where I got that story? And I said, no. She said, a tree in my backyard told me that story. And you know, when you're talking to a crazy person, you don't try not to look them in the eyes, right? So I said, oh, that's interesting. She said, I have an even better story that you should read. A cloud passing over my house told me that story. But you know, it's interesting, you know, where your knowledge comes from, you know, like you never really, I didn't understand that till years later. I just thought she was crazy. I didn't mind because she was wonderful, but she was also crazy. There's a question way in the back. I like it. You people are so nice. You ask one question at a time.
Funny that you should say that. I have like 1.5. So I was interested by your comment earlier about feminism starting in the black community and then being taken over by whites, or that's what I understood. So I wonder if you could say more about that. And then kind of related, I believe you write fiction and nonfiction. I'm not familiar with the body of your work. And so I wondered if you could say a little bit about how, you know, not which you like better, but just sort of why you get drawn at a certain moment to do something that's more political commentary and other times fiction.
Okay, fine, but you have to do that. What's the first question again? I didn't quite understand it.
You had said earlier this evening that feminism began in the black community and then was taken over.
Oh, yeah, Sojourner Truth, man. Sojourner Truth is a joint. Sojourner Truth says, you know, ain't I working too? You know, ain't I a woman? You know, Sojourner Truth, she said, I go out, you know, and I pick 10 bales of cotton, they pay me $5. Motherfucker over here picks 4 bales of cotton, they pay him $6. What's up with that? You know what I mean? It's like Sojourner Truth, like, told women, she said, we as women, and we need to be equal. I mean, she did it in New York, she did it in Mississippi, she did it everywhere. Sojourner Truth really is the beginning of the modern feminist movement in America. You know, so people are, you know, but nobody knows that, you know, and they don't really like it so much. But you have to remember, you know, she was something, man. I wouldn't want to be in the same room with Sojourner Truth, man. That scared the shit out of me, you know. Could you imagine being the man cheating on Sojourner Truth? She said, ain't I a woman? And the second question is about nonfiction. You know, the interesting thing about nonfiction is like, you know, there's a lot more truth in fiction than there is in nonfiction. Let's start off there. Because, you know, somebody wants to write, you know, the history of Ronald Reagan. Well, if you like Ronald Reagan, that book is going to be a lot different than the person who doesn't like Ronald Reagan, but the facts are going to be the same. You understand what I'm saying? That the problem, you know, so the thing, you know, and nonfiction is when you want to tell somebody the truth, you know, like, hey, I think you look very beautiful. I would like to spend the night with you. That's like, you know, that's nonfiction, you know. That's nonfiction. Now, the rest of it, you might say, you know, I'm worth $100,000, and, you know, I know your sister, and I'm disease-free. All that stuff is, you know, it's prose, but it's not nonfiction. You know what I'm saying? You know, but what you want is you want to, when you want to tell the truth. So when I'm talking about politics, you know, like I was watching this dude on television the other night, and I was in LA, you know, this crazy station. I think only one guy owns the station, and he's always talking on the station. He doesn't sleep, and he sounds crazy. But I was listening to the guy, like, because he said something about Jeb Bush. He said, Jeb Bush is talking about Social Security, but Jeb Bush doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what his father did. He didn't know what Ronald Reagan did. Now, I know that's true, so I stopped and I said, well, let me listen to this crazy man for a minute, you know. And he said, you know, about Social Security, he says, I don't think that we should make the retirement age later. I think we should cut it down by 5 years, maybe 7 years. People should retire earlier so more people could get jobs. I'm saying, this guy's crazy. And he said, but then he said something that I had forgotten. He said, there's a cap on the tax of Social Security. I think it's $148,000. I'm not absolutely sure, but I think it's that. And they made it back in like 1950 or 1946 or whenever they made it. And he said, well, just take the cap off. Let everybody pay an equal amount for however much money they made. And then we would have enough money for Social Security. And I went, wow, that's true. And especially since the cap was made in the 40s or the 50s, you know, that money is worth a lot less now than it was then. So even if you didn't take the cap off, you just made it up to $1 million or $2 million, that would be good enough, right? That's the reason that you do nonfiction. You try to tell the truth to somebody so that they can alter their world. And sometimes fiction doesn't do that. Oh, there's another question.
So I ride the Northeast Regional and the Acela a lot.
Uh-huh.
And I love the train. And I thought it was interesting that the story started with Leonid on the train.
Yeah.
So my question is, are you a train man, or did you just decide that that was just
Is
a
that like,
cool way to
rather
start
than
your-
being a breast man or a leg man?
Let me rephrase my question. I'll rephrase the question.
I'm a train man.
So,
Baby, you like my train? Mama, I will follow you all the way to New York.
So my rephrased question is...
Now, I heard your question. I'm sorry. I'm just making fun of it. Look, I live in New York. I live in New York, And if I, like I just went to L.A., I'm not going to take a train to L.A., but Boston, D.C., train. I mean, like, it just makes more sense. It's faster, it's easier. It's just like that thunderstorm they had today. All summer long, they have them every afternoon in D.C. So, like, you plan to ride a train. I was in a train once with this woman, and we're going up, and we hit this terrible thunderstorm, terrible. And Ted Kennedy was sitting up in the front of the plane, and she said, well, it's okay, nothing will happen to us because Ted Kennedy is sitting there. I said to her, you have the wrong family, The only thing that's going to happen, we're both writers, I said, we're both going to be forgotten in this plane crash.
Thank you.
So I was wondering about whether or not you have tried other artistic expressions like painting, because it seems like the way you write, the way I read your writing, is a lot like a painting, and telling a story is a lot like creating a portrait.
I draw a lot. I'm going to tell you, I have absolutely no talent drawing. I am like so untalented that most 7-year-old children are better at drawing than I am. No, I'm not exaggerating. But I've been drawing for so long that I've actually developed a voice. If you look at my website, waltermosley.com, I have a few of my drawings on there. And I think at Emerson in November, I'm going to do a kind of a large show of my work. Did one at NYU, I'm going to do one up there. I do pottery. I like doing pottery a lot. I work in film and plays, which is, still writing, but a little different. I try to do different things. I realize, that talent is more or less unimportant unless you're a genius. And so if you can learn how to express yourself, no matter how that is, it's worthwhile.
What scripts are out there for movies that I can go see?
What?
What scripts are out there for movies that I can go and see?
Oh, I don't know. I'm working on stuff here and there. Really, honestly, I don't know. I've just been working on this a show with John Singleton called Snowfall, which is about from the cocaine years to the crack years. I have a show called Parishioner with Cinemax. I have a show called Mr. In Between with Spike. I just finished a movie for HBO with Sam Jackson based on my book, The Last Days of Ptolemy Gray. Josh Boone, who did The Fault in Their Stars, wants to do Easy Rawlins at 3 different generations of time, so 3 different actors playing him at different ages. So I'm doing those things. I never believe in any of them, but I keep doing them. Sometimes they pay me. Is that it? Have I? There's yes.
I just want to know how to your updates on your website. I like to keep up with you, but sometimes, like the things you just mentioned, they're not on your website.
Well, no, and I wouldn't tell them that yet because I haven't gotten far enough in them.
Oh, okay.
I like to know when something's really going to happen. So I tell you that the show, for instance, with John Singleton, it probably will go, but it might not go. So I don't want to.
Oh, I want to know what you're thinking.
You want to know what I'm thinking?
Yeah.
Me too. I'd love to know what I'm thinking. Have I done it? Have I answered every question in the room? Say what? Thank you.